Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome everybody to our March 15th webinar with someone from the World Environmental Center, Ms. Gwen Davidow. We're very excited to start this trilogy, which will have Gwen as our first person. And this trilogy will go for 2 more months. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But right now, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Ms. Davidow, who has built her career in international business, concentrating on collaboration with non-governmental organizations, focusing on international development. She's managed a number of corporate member-based projects, such as the Greening the Supply Chain Initiative in China with General Motors. As acting president of WEC, or the World Environmental Center, Ms. Davidow oversees programmatic activities including WEC's current State Department-funded projects in Central America on increasing the efficiency of local suppliers by implementing environmental improvements and public-private partnerships to support the environmentally responsible growth of small and medium enterprises in supply chains and industry associations throughout Latin America and North Africa. So we were going to, I will be getting to Ms. Davidow shortly, but we will be holding, after the webinar, as always, we invite you to send your questions and comments to me privately via the chat, and we will take those questions at the end. But Ms. Davidow has made a special request that we have 2 breaks within the presentation, and I will, if you have questions that come up right away, I will be happy to take those questions to her mid-presentation and with your final questions at the end. So without further ado, I welcome Gwen.
Holly, thank you so much. I'm going to switch to my screen.
Okay.
If that's okay.
That would be great.
All right. Holly, can you hear me well?
Yes, you sound
I'll
great.
assume that you. Okay, and I'll just ask that everybody stay on mute and certainly use the chat option. And Holly, if you could just let me know when you see the screen.
You're good to go, Gwen.
Great. All right, let me just take myself off video for right now. Like, literally, how is that done? Okay, I think I did it. Can you see the screen and nothing else?
Yes, you look fine. Oh, I see your your video. Your video. Did you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to shut that out. So pardon me, everybody, while I do that.
Go down to the bottom left of the screen, Gwen.
Got it.
Okay.
And now I'm going to go back to share screen. Okay, how's it look now, Holly?
Looks fine, Gwen.
All right, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank EarthShift Global for inviting me to speak about our project, one that they were so integral to. And thanks to those of you who decided that this would be a fun thing to do with your lunch hour. I'm kicking off the trilogy webinar, as Holly described, on our project that we call La Red de Innovación e Impacto. The project is basically an innovative solution on how to support economic development through government funding for capacity building, to develop networks of communities, and doing all of this through community management and grant funding. My teammates, Elodie Roy from Bastel and Caroline Taylor from EarthShift Global, will present in subsequent webinars, as Holly mentioned, on the results from, respectively, a monitoring and evaluation perspective and an SROI, or sustainability return on investment perspective. All right. Before I begin, I'd like to give you a preview of the agenda here, and also note, as Holly said, that you should feel free to send your questions in via the chat mode. I understand it's a webinar, and so it's not possible really to be too discursive through this presentation, but I would love to receive any questions based on Holly's screening that are pertinent to the slides that I'm discussing now instead of waiting till the end. So please feel free to send those into Holly, and she will be the gatekeeper and discern if they are worth discussing now or maybe better to save till the end. This is just a brief agenda of what we're going to go through. I'll provide you an overview and discuss a little bit about why this is important, and talk about really what La Red does and has done. And then I thought it would be helpful to discuss just a couple of our members so that you get a flavor for really who we're supporting and who they are in turn supporting, and as well provide some noteworthy results. I'm not going to go too into that because that is really what EarthShift and Bastel are here to do in the next webinars, but I certainly want to highlight them because they're pretty awesome. So, I'll just touch on those, and then I'll talk about our next phase, which is the Power to Grow Challenge, which, before you ask, is why we have our branding on this presentation as the Power to Grow. And we'll get to that by the end of the presentation. Okay. Holly, can you just let me know, I know there might be a bit of a delay in the slide changing. Can you see the overview slide now?
Yes, Gwen, you're good to go. Just keep going.
Great. So, La Red de Innovación y Impacto is also known as the network. I'm going to be using those interchangeably throughout the presentation. Was originally created, funded by the U.S. Department of State to accelerate business development through sustainable economic growth in Latin America. As Holly mentioned, I'm from the World Environment Center. It's an international nonprofit organization whose mission is to advance sustainable practices in partnership with our multinational corporate members, the private sector in general, governments, academia, and other NGOs. So we, as WEC, are the lead organization in this initiative and have selected a strong team of international experts to work with us, including Bastel, who will be presenting in the next of the trilogy series next month on monitoring and evaluation results of this project to date. EarthShift Global, our host today. They were brought on to conduct selected sustainability return on investment studies, but also not just to assess the SROIs of certain members, but also to provide trainings throughout the region and conduct workshops. As an aside, I just want to note about the fact that our funder, the Department of State, had requested this specific consulting on both monitoring and evaluation and on SROI assessments. This is, I feel that this is important to note because it really is an indicator of the growing importance of what I like to call, I'm not the only one that calls it this, the trend of the measuring beyond the numbers in international development. This was specific set-aside funding in the proposal design that State Department said we want to ensure that we have experts that are able to provide SROI assessments and also be able to not only do a monitoring and evaluation of the whole project, but provide training to the grantees on how they do their monitoring and evaluation. I think that's really important to note. So this full team was brought in to basically provide the technical assistance and create the value for the network. I should also note that we have additional partners. One was Context Partners, who is a community activator organization, which I did not know was a thing until we hired a community activator organization, and they were fantastic. They basically went into Latin America and lit the fire for what would eventually become our community. They found all the parts of the ecosystem, the applicants, the candidates, the interested parties, the supporters, the customers, the investors, to help us create what wound up being the La Red ecosystem. We've also recently contracted with Rio Slum Studios, who is our newest partner. They are a strategic marketing organization focusing explicitly on Latin America. Okay, so we developed this full team, and the whole idea was to support the growth of local innovative solutions that address the needs of small and medium enterprises. That phraseology is important, and I'll get to that in a second. I have to say that the network has increasingly demonstrated itself to be an effective means to source and scale impactful solutions in the region. We initially created this network by selecting the organizations that had been judged in an international innovation challenge in 2014 that we had designed and then conducted. We did that to initially search for the 4 most innovative solutions to address the needs of SMEs in the region. And after we found the most 4 and provided them with $500,000 grants each, those are the 4 that EarthShift Global subsequently conducted SROI studies on. We were then asked by State Department to expand our support. And so we realized that what we could do is go back to the top 30 selected solutions from the challenge, including the 4. So we go back to the other 26 that had not received grant funding, but had already been vetted through the challenge process, and had been really, by their selection as the top 30, deemed to be the 30 top innovative solutions in the region. And that's important because we didn't have to recreate a selection system, and anybody who has gone through this type of process to find grantees knows that that is a pretty heavy lift. But in addition, built into our challenge process was the idea that we needed to get vetting. We needed to vet all of those top 30 solutions with State Department before we awarded the 4. So very importantly, they were pre-vetted solutions on top of being the best in the region. Anyone who has worked with the U.S. government in providing grant funding knows that that's a very important aspect, a very important screen to pass, and especially when providing U.S. government funding to foreign organizations. The fact that we had 30 pre-vetted innovative solutions all ready to go to pretty much populate what we had deemed would be the network of innovation and impact was an incredibly valuable asset for us. So as you can see on this map, the solutions ran from the tip of Chile to the top of Mexico. We covered a lot of Spanish-speaking Latin America. Again, an important factor, we needed the network to be one language, so we worked specifically with the Spanish-speaking countries of Latin America, and from those, the 30 were selected.
Gwen, I'll interrupt you now with one of our questions that just seems appropriate. If you could just tell us briefly how a community activator works. How does a community activator work? Was that in Latin America per se, or?
I wish I could tell you. I could probably sell a lot of books if I understood how they actually worked. What Context Partners did was really, they have their value. Context Partners' value came from the fact that they had networks of talented people and organizations that they tapped into in any of the countries that their client needs to create a type of network. Context Partners in particular really works with social enterprises and sustainable development initiatives. They use tools that I wish I had a better grasp on. Their level of community activation for us, what we saw on the front end of that, the results of that, was an amazing collection of targeted. For example, when we did the challenge, we needed to have a whole bunch of potential candidates apply for this grant funding, right? To apply for the challenge. So they did all of the back-end development on that. I don't even just mean about the website, which they also did. They did the website development, what you see here on this screen, as well as the challenge website development. They went and brought in the candidates so that by the time we closed down the challenge, we had 500 applicants that had submitted forms to be considered for the La Red Challenge. So what they do on the back end, they worked their magic. Because we don't need necessarily that aspect of the project anymore, we no longer contract with them. But I would, in a heartbeat, recommend that type of community activation for anybody who is looking to find and build an ecosystem. So that's really what they did for us. I hope that answers the question. And I highly recommend Context Partners in general.
Okay,
so I'm just going to continue on. So here we've got a couple of data points about the 30 organizations that make up the network. Collaboratively, they use our business network to build skills and explore shared challenges and opportunities for scaling their solutions and services. As I mentioned, for these 30 were originally granted $500,000 each, and then 8 other La Red members were subsequently granted $80,000 each, all of which to scale their solutions. So there were, at any given time, there were anywhere between 4 to 12 funded La Red members and also 18 non-funded La Red members that were taking advantage of the benefits of the network itself, as well as our capacity building and training as a team. So I want to point out that the 30 members of La Red range across sectors and countries, and their services vary from sustainable farming, for example, to software for labor relations development, to local incubators, and that's just a sampling. Half of them are NGOs, but we also have for-profit businesses as well as some governmental and academic institutions. So we have this assorted collection of innovative solutions that really, frankly, proved a bit challenging when trying to present the network as a whole. Certainly when you're going to an institution that you want to help, or a stakeholder, or even an investor that you want to help support your network, typically you're going with a network that has at least a singular flavor. But ours is not that. So for example, we wouldn't necessarily, the institution or investor that we go to that would be very interested in an innovative, vetted, funded solution that, for example, trains women to handcraft artisanal jewelry in Guatemala as a business, is not necessarily the same institutional stakeholder that we would target to talk about our other member, who is a sustainable solution to agricultural waste through vermifiltration out of Colombia. So all of these members certainly run the gamut. But the one thing that they share as a characteristic is that they are scalable, sustainable, local, innovative services for SMEs. So they're considered, we consider them the levers to access the end user beneficiary, which are those SMEs that so often are difficult in international development to access, as they're the last mile, right? Whether they are those women in Guatemala that are being trained to handcraft artisanal jewelry, or the small farmers that are receiving training and technical assistance and equipment from a vermifiltration group in Colombia. That said, clearly we're not working with a homogeneous group. But the flip side of that is perhaps what I think most of the team would agree, and certainly the network would agree, is one of the most valuable lessons learned from LabEd to date. And that is through LabEd and through the team's hands-on management and the training conducted by us and context partners and EarthShift Global and Bastel and external experts and on-site events and ceremonies and webinars, we were able to really create organic relationships. And because they weren't homogenous, because they were in different countries and sectors, they were able, I think more so, I believe more so, to find avenues to help each other to scale, to create partnerships that they would never have found otherwise. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a future slide. Okay, so why is this important? You might be asking, why did the U.S. Department of State provide millions of dollars to a program whose main purpose is to scale up solutions that support SMEs in Latin America? So the history, a little bit of background, is that this particular design came from a hemispheric collection of all of the country's governments who had a ministerial level initiative explicitly for the purpose of finding shared pathways to prosperity. Indeed, that's what the initiative was called, was Pathways to Prosperity. So this is based off of the understanding, the given, that the best way to address shared concerns of regional security, women's empowerment, environmentally responsible growth, strengthening markets, etc., was really to work through sustainably strengthening local economies. And certainly in the developing world, and I can't say this definitively, but certainly in Latin America, one of the better ways to do that is by building up the systems and infrastructures that support the growth of local SMEs, which make up, as you can see, such a huge percentage of the economies in Latin America. For those of you in international development, this is not news. However, there are a couple of things that the Pathways to Prosperity ministries did that they mandated for the initiatives that they wanted to fund that were new. One is to not rely on the north to south model of international development, wherein North American or European consultancies would come in to build the capacity of the SMEs. Now, I say that, and it seems interesting that WEC, which is a global company but headquartered in the U.S., EarthShift Global is a U.S. company, Bastel is a Canadian company. Yes, that's true, but this goes to the second part, which is an equally important factor is there's a better way to access the SMEs through leverage points. So we weren't brought in to train or help scale or capacity build the SMEs. We were brought in to find the levers, the hubs to the spokes of all of those SMEs, so that we could find local scalable solutions that service SMEs and help them scale, so that we're actually finding what we like to call the multiplier lever. So we're not accessing the SMEs and training them. We're accessing the local economy solutions that service the SMEs. And these were two very important factors that we needed to keep in mind in our design of the network and of our funding of the scalable solutions. So our task then was to find those local solutions and help scale their growth and make sure that they have the ability to strengthen the SMEs that would ultimately be the beneficiaries of all of this work. So at this point, before moving on, I just want to stop and see if there are any questions. I can answer some certainly further in the talk. But Holly, is there anything I can further elucidate?
Yes, I actually do have a couple questions here. One is, could you speak briefly about how the program defined the multiplier capacity building? And secondly, what were the particular characteristics you looked for among the partners and supported programs to support that?
Okay, I'll do the first one, and then I might need to get the second one repeated. But the multiplier effect is going back to what the Pathways to Prosperity ministerial group determined. For those who are familiar with international development, typically an organization is funded to go in and try to oftentimes access that last mile of beneficiaries, those small and medium enterprises that really are the ones that will help grow the economy ultimately. I mean, there's, of course, tons of different flavors of international development, but that's the kind that we work in, where we're accessing that last mile. What Pathways to Prosperity said is, you know what, we've already got solutions locally that are helping those SMEs. We need you to help those solutions. Those are the multipliers. So, and I'll go into a couple of examples later that will help clarify what we mean by this. But we're not looking to train the cocoa farmer in Nicaragua. We already know, well, we didn't then, but we do now, because I remember. We already know that there is a solution that's already doing that locally, that's innovative, that's accessing hundreds of local farmers. So wouldn't it be better in international development, especially sustainable economic development, to go to that lever, to go to that hub and say, we're going to make it so that you can provide your support better to those end users, to those beneficiaries, those small farmers, those small businesses. So that's what we mean by the multiplier effect. Wouldn't this funding be better used if we helped existing solutions scale up how they can help the SMEs instead of us going in, reinventing the wheel, and then providing that to the SMEs?
That makes sense, Gwen. But were there any particular characteristics that you were looking for among the partners and the supported programs to support that?
Holly, when you mean partners, do you mean our team partners?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we wanted them to, well, we wanted an experience in Latin America, for one thing. And certainly we had worked with Bastel in the past. In fact, they had evaluated us. We knew that they are preeminent in monitoring evaluation to the extent that State Department had funded them years ago to train all of their funded implementers on monitoring and evaluation. So basically, even if we hadn't been using Bastel as a partner, we would be using their methodology. We also work well with them, which is very important for our team because we do a lot. We have limited resources, so we do need to really have the top quality. The SROI is a different story because there really wasn't a path for that. State Department, and as far as I know, really in general, U.S. government funded international development has not looked at sustainability return on investment as much as, for example, the corporate sector has. And certainly with State Department, this was a new area. So we looked for a partner that knew what they were doing with the understanding that perhaps their international experience might not be as much as, for example, Bastel's. EarthShift Global was one of the companies that we came across who really understood the fact that we needed to get not just a valuable product from EarthShift Global, but we also needed to incorporate them into the team as an implementer. And so that's definitely one of the main factors that we were looking for, is that this wasn't simply somebody that was providing a service to WEC as the prime, but somebody that was providing a service to our grantees and beneficiaries as well.
And then Gwen, you called out economic empowerment of women specifically. Were there other groups that you also focused on specifically? For example, indigenous groups?
Frankly, we did not. We didn't focus on it as much as empowerment of women, and I'll tell you why. It was one of the criteria from Department of State. We were lucky that several of our beneficiaries, simply by nature of their services, rather our LabEd members, simply by nature of their services, address indigenous groups as part of their mission statements. But really, when we were trying to build the criteria that we had to focus on, we mainly in the first couple of screenings we had to incorporate what State Department wanted us to focus on. Indigenous groups is actually growing much more so in that criteria, but when this was developed, it was much more of a focus on economic empowerment of women.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you continue now.
Thanks, Holly. Okay. All right. So now to actually LabEd. So where we last left it is that the State Department, through the Pathways to Prosperity Ministerial Initiative, had funded us to design and implement a project that scales local innovative solutions to strengthen the SME economy. So that was our directive. We did this initially with the challenge, looking to find the best solutions, as I've explained before. And so then over the course of 2014 to 2016, we built out this network, la Red de Innovación e Impacto. We designed the infrastructure and the communication systems. We reinforced participation through customized management and communication. We provided the trainings that I've touched on previously. And all of this was informed, and still is informed, through continuous conversations with the members directly, through assessments and surveys, and certainly from the information provided to us from Baskel and EarthShift Global, site visits, and other events and webinars. So we were definitely we definitely had a heavy touch with our network, and I do think that was part of the success that we have.
And I understand, Gwen, that La Red actually means network in Spanish. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. Why, thank you, Holly, for pointing that out. Yes, La Red is network, so I use them interchangeably. When you say the network in English, it means a lot of things, as it does in Spanish when you say La Red. But we really, when we're talking about it, we say La Red because that's really our nomenclature for for this project. So, going back to the types of activities that we did, we certainly conducted, or our team member, EarthShift Global, conducted the SROI studies and workshops. Monitoring evaluation was conducted by Bastel, which also included training in their methodology to all of our members. And subsequently, the data that they reported on rolled up into the data that we look at as the results of the project. So it was incredibly beneficial on a number of fronts. So I want to point out that the importance of this type of training and reporting was really a strong focus, because not only did we need to be able to measure and share the impact of La Red, but we also wanted to make sure, very, very crucially, that our members, these 30 members, were able to do the same with their own solutions, independently of us. Anybody in this business knows that that's really part of the challenge, is being able to tell your story. And part of the monitoring and evaluation and the SROIs is the ability to do that with the data and to show the impact of La Red, not only as an overall project, but also to share the individual stories. So I thought I would take an opportunity now to share with you some of these solutions to kind of personalize really the heft of some of the members that we work with. This is Vista Volcanes. They are one of our members that provide smallholder farmers in Guatemala and now El Salvador as well with sustainable, easy-to-build greenhouse tents, as well as technical training on environmentally responsible farming practices. So interestingly, this is always what's great about innovation, right? Sometimes innovation is just that it's not necessarily technological as much as it's just a better way to do something pretty simple. The genius here is not in the fact that it's simply sustainable crop development, which is of course important, but also in the fact that this package of training and equipment and technical expertise allows a family to grow higher value crops at a higher yield. So for example, in the highlands of Chimaltenango, Guatemala, where this photo was taken, these farmers are growing Roma tomatoes, as you can see. This is a crop that in that region is otherwise very difficult to grow, let alone at successful yields. So the farmer grows these, you get the training and in sustainable growth and or in sustainable farming, and has the tent and all of the expertise available to him through Vista Volcanes. And then is able to sell Roma tomatoes at the market, which is the next, which is the business that they, the arena in which this produce is sold, at least the first level arena. And so they're able to do that and get more money for their crops and a greater yield, because these are crops that otherwise aren't sold, so they're sold at a higher value than say, the potatoes or the squash that is typically sold in the markets in this region. These packages also include a network of Vista Volcanes own farmers that spur cooperation between the producers, and then through that, with a collective, are able to work with supermarkets that not only offer the low risk and high yield to the farmers, but ultimately to the supermarkets as well. It certainly is really, so you can see certainly the greenhouse that you see there with, with the bamboo tent poles, and it's not necessarily high tech, but it really is a brilliant approach to helping lift up the economies of small farmholders in this region. So ultimately, while they're improving their crops and improving their crop quality and their crop yield, they're reducing their environmental impact. And what we're doing now actually is working with a group of Vista Volcanes farmers to see how we can export their produce, because it is because they can fit that niche market of environmentally responsible, organically grown, pesticide-free produce to outside of Guatemala. I want to point out that, and Holly, let me know if these are available to the public. One of the SROI studies that EarthShift Global did is on Vista Volcanes. Are those available to the public, or do they need to be for members?
They will be, but not right at this moment. But our Caroline Taylor will be speaking about that during the third part of the trilogy, and questions about that could be asked to her. Excellent.
So everybody please come back for that. Okay, another member as an example is Travolution. They're from Chile, but they were funded specifically by our project to create the first ever Latin America-wide community-based tourism conference in the middle of Colombia. And when I say the middle of Colombia, I mean the middle of Colombia. That actually took place a year ago this month. Their network is made up of local tourism stakeholders from farms and small towns. And their goal is to foster sustainable development of communities and travelers. The model is basically designed to improve local tourism management for entrepreneurs, the small businesses that can benefit from community-based tourism. By definition, this type of tourism is obviously geared toward lifting up the micro and small businesses, particularly in rural communities in developing nations. And I have to say, I kind of thought that it was similar to what we all know as ecotourism. Very different model. It is very much based on the idea that, yes, it's sustainable tourism, but it's based on the businesses that are alive and thriving in the communities you want to visit that will actually make your travel there much more valuable. And as an example, I have some of my personal photos from going to that Latin American community-based tourism in Colombia, where Travolution basically enlisted all of the local farms, the local lodges, the wineries, the small textile businesses, every small business and rural business within the area to provide on-site tours and to exhibit at the conference. And so Travolution coordinated all of this. Now, just as an aside, an interesting fact about this part of Colombia is that it had been overlooked during the national government's focus on fighting the drug cartels. So for that, because it actually, there wasn't a lot of cartel activity in this area, so it had become somewhat isolated because it didn't need to be focused on as much. To the extent that the highway that we used to travel from Bogota to this area had been built, I think, really within the last 5 years to access this area. So we're talking about a pretty isolated region. But that's the whole point, is look at this beauty. And wouldn't it be great to continue having this beauty and not necessarily have a sandals resort plopped on top of that mountain? No offense to sandals, they're lovely resorts. So all of the hotels that were used for the conference attendees, including this one with the view in the top photo, which was from my balcony, were actually small rural businesses, almost all family-owned. And the two bottom photos are of a local self-sustaining eco-dairy farm in the valleys of this village. I'm not kidding, this is, the dairy comes from the pastor's goats, sheep, and cows that we got to pet. And then all of that is aged in the mountain caves on the property and is powered by water that comes down from the waterfalls from this mountain cave. You get the point. This is amazing. And this is what Travolution does. They find these areas and then they support these local businesses, something that you would never have known about without this type of support from that lever, from that multiplier hub, right? So this grant from La Red, as well as the rest of the La Red community of solutions, as well as our technical assistance, not only helped Travolution to implement this event, but has been instrumental in bringing their next regional event to Guatemala later this year, which will support community-based tourism much like this, specifically for Central America.
Okay, Gwen, I just wanted to let you know we have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, I'm going to go quickly through the rest of this. I got a little excited about our members. Lutheran World Relief is another member. They provide a mobile platform and technology and technical assistance for cocoa farmers in Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador. I will skip explaining a lot of what they do and just tell you that one of the really cool stories about them is we funded them to expand this to the farmers throughout Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador, to the extent that they were able to bring some of these small farmers to the International Cacao Salon in Paris, which is a thing. It's the preeminent chocolate salon in the world. And not only were they able to help a whole bunch of their small farms exhibit at this amazing event, 2 of the farms that are the beneficiaries from Mobile Cocoa were selected as finalists in the Salon's Cocoa of Excellence program, something that we're all very, very proud of. So as you can see, there are many, many results to share. These are some of them that are taken from actually one of Bastel's reports, thank you, LOD, and are really a snapshot of the impact that this network has been able to have. And it's important that I say impact because these are the types of results that connect the on-the-ground tasks that we do to those high-level goals that I had mentioned at the beginning of building economies, increasing and improving employment, strengthening markets, and creating collaborative opportunities to partner and scale that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So that's a little bit about where we are now. And just for the final aspect of the presentation, I want to share with you the next phase of LARED, which is to find new solutions that service very specifically micro enterprises like our current members service SMEs. This time with a special focus on agriculture, agro-industry, and textiles. And as we did before, these solutions will be covered through an international challenge, which we branded the Power to Grow. The objective, as you see, are very similar, but this time with a greater focus on the smallest businesses. And so we're looking for the solutions that access those smaller businesses and looking for them in these areas that have been deemed a priority by the Department of State. As a matter of fact, we have just publicly launched this challenge on Monday. The website went live Monday afternoon. So I encourage all of you to share this news and the website with any organizations that you know that are based in Central America that you think might meet the overall criteria of challenge eligibility. And we have specific requirements as well I'll go to in a second. I also want to let you know that we have a communications toolkit that we can share with you if you have people that you think might be interested in this and still need some assistance on how to describe it. We have a whole packet that we can give you that has emails and visuals and graphics and who to connect to that you can send to potential candidates or potential stakeholders. I'm happy to share that with anybody that's interested. My email is on this presentation or it's somewhere on the website. Please do get in touch with me. And just to let you know, here's a couple of the overall criteria that we're looking for. This time we have to look for NGOs. We can't do private sector, or we can't do for-profits. I should say instead of NGOs, I mean non-profit organizations. These are the bulleted list of the general screenings that we need, but as you can see over here, we've got a flag. So if you go to, this is what's on our website, these flags. If you go to any one of these flags and mouse over it, it will show you specifically what we're looking for in each of these. And I should note also that the applications are due April 27th. The website is, of course, listed right here, powertogrow.rec.org. Now, one of the things that we want to make sure we do, because LARED has been so impactful to this point, is to incorporate the current LARED members. So each one of those countries has a current LARED member that will partner with the winning candidate from that country to implement targeted projects in those countries. So we're also making sure that we're continuing to provide the mentoring and the technical assistance and the capacity building and the organic partnership growth that we've provided in the past. At this point, we're just making sure that we're reaching a broader scale. So it will be 7, possibly 8 incoming class members, as we like to call them, for LARED, but the micro enterprises that they reach, again, will have a multiplier effect on growing and strengthening the economies in our region and making sure that we continue to have a growing sustainable economy throughout the countries that are our neighbors. So with that, I want to thank EarthShift Global for not only providing me with this opportunity to share the story of La Red and a bit of our results, but also for their incredible support and expertise over the past several years as a great team partner. And just to remind everybody that this is one of three presentations in a trilogy about the activities, the results, and the impact of La Red. So Holly, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Gwen. I have a couple more questions. One, you had mentioned that working with Bastel and EarthShift Global was an indicator of the growing importance of measuring beyond the numbers. Can you give some more information on what that means?
Yes, happy to. I'll give this from the perspective of an implementer, right? Because I'm sure EarthShift Global and Bastel will talk about this as well. But we've been doing international sustainable development for a while now, and there has definitely been a focus in, at least on the U.S. side of that area, to move away from what Bastel has taught us to call outputs, which are, and I think anybody who's been in this field for a while will know what I mean. It used to be that you would report on, this is how many people we trained, this is how many site visits we conducted, this is how much money we gave, right? And those were really the results that you reported on. And none of that is bad, but it doesn't really tell the proper story. The story needs to be told at an outcome level and at an impact level. And that's where La Red, because of our work with EarthShift Global and Bastel, really has been able to focus on not what we did, but what happened with what we did. How many jobs were created? Because that's really why we're there, right? Economic security, job creation, women's empowerment. Those are the much more difficult aspects to measure, but the most important ones. So fortunately, in U.S. government funding in particular, that trend has moved away from an implementer saying, we just got back from country X and we trained this many people, thank you for your money, U.S. government, and much more so, we have been able to see that this has strengthened labor relations, or that these companies are now at a better capacity to trade on the international market, or these farmers are now far more sustainable. So that trend is a good trend, and I think that certainly our partners are leading the way in it.
Thank you. I have someone who writes, thank you, Gwen, for sharing information about this program. I'm curious about the decision to use grants versus loans or microloans to help out these members. Has the State Department considered a microfinance loan approach to undertaking this program?
So it's a great question. We are not loan givers. That's a different type of animal from what we do. And it certainly is a great, and microfinance in general is certainly a great tool to use. It was made very clear to us that no loans can be provided through our U.S. government funding. I frankly don't know if U.S. government funding is able to do a loan program. I know certainly other multilateral institutions do those very well, but we were actually just not allowed to do that. Basically the State Department said the State Department is not a bank, and we are not a loan institution as WEC. It doesn't mean that it isn't a great tool, a great methodology. It's just something that we were barred from doing.
Okay.
For a variety of reasons.
Okay. And considering that government funding for initiatives like this does not last forever, what are the long-term goals of La Red?
That's fantastic, Holly. So one of the things that the State Department asked us to do in this current iteration is to find sustainable institutional support. In other words, long-term support for once the funding ends. The funding will end in 2020, and most likely we will not be able to continue the funding, even though the program is successful, and State Department acknowledges that. There's only so far you can go with State Department funding. Their whole goal is to really plant seeds, or at least saplings, right, and then find someone else to water and feed. So one of the things that we did by explicit mandate from State Department is to work with Real Studio, which will be helping us with our marketing strategy. Along with Vestel, we are trying to tell the story of this really potent network that is different than anything else in the region, and trying to find institutional interest that can carry on either funding us to do this or carry on doing the work on their own. I think we've created a model that should be further developed and expanded, but we have about a year and a half to find someone that can do that for us. Certainly for State Department, that will be considered one of the greater successes of their funded activity, is if we can plant this somewhere and continue to have it grow beyond what we've done.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank you, Gwen, for a great presentation. I want to just make sure everybody was able to see Elodie Roy's comment about from Bastel. She will be our next speaker next month, who says, as for Bastel, since one of the main objectives of La Red was to reinforce local capacities in order for the organizations to be able to scale and replicate the results and impact, it became very important to track the data and information about results and understand what works well and identify lessons learned as project advances in order to support the scaling process and help success of the initiative. By training members of La Red and supporting the results-based monitoring and evaluation of La Red and the individual grantees, Bastel helped contribute to those activities. So Ms. Elodie Roy will be speaking with us next month at the same time, 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time on April 26th, and her title is Accelerating Sustainable Economic Growth, Innovation, and Job Creation Opportunities While Building Capacity of Organizations, a review of results achieved by the Innovation Challenge and La Red de Innovación e Impacto. So Elodie will drill down into specific achievements and the power of monitoring and evaluation in enabling the success. And the third part of the trilogy will be from EarthShift Global's Caroline Taylor, who will take us through the Sustainability Return on Investment, or SROI, to assess the broader societal impact from supporting La Red members partner, Vista Volcanes. So with that, I will close this webinar and encourage you all to attend the next two. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay.